Hello, my name is Dennis Barnes and welcome to SolidWorks 215 Tech Days. The presentation today is from top to bottom. Assembly design choices for efficient SolidWorks modeling. Again, my name is Dennis Barnes and I'm an applications engineer here with MCAD Technologies. And today we're going to be examining the differences. I'm going to go ahead and skip past this slide. Versus bottom-up assembly modeling. Now on your right there I have an assembly that was put together with components that were already designed outside in their own component files inside SolidWorks SLD PRT files, and they were brought together using assembly mating relationships to create the overall assembly. Now the part on the left, it's a hold down clamp, and it was designed actually using top-down assembly modeling, which means that everything was created and in context for the assembly. So let's go ahead and get started here, and let's talk about the differences here. The two methods that I'm going to show you today for top-down design will include the assembly layout mode and a sketch picture mode. These both give you an opportunity to approach the design from the top down. The thing about the assembly mode is that the advantage to it is that you can actually show some motion inside the assembly. So you can work out the interaction between some of the components within a 2 or 3D sketch that will help you create the motion and get things worked out before you start creating the parts. The downside to this is that if you have an overall look for the entire assembly and you want to start modeling using that, you can't really use that in the layout mode. Now the next method I'm going to show you is a sketch picture, and basically what you get is an overall image of the assembly that you're going to be building, and you use that to start creating all your in-context parts, and you're following the picture within that. Now the sketch picture is really nice because it gives you the look and you can refer back to it every time, but unfortunately you can't really do any motion inside the sketch picture until you're completed with all the component sides. So you could create the 3D components in the assembly and then you introduce the motion inside there. Now both of these particular methods can use sketch blocks. The demonstration I'm going to give today doesn't use sketch blocks in the sketch picture area, but we do use it extensively in the top-down or the assembly model layout mode. Okay? So let's take a look at how this is done. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how the assembly layout mode is done. So I'm going to go ahead and start. What I'd like to do here first, I was getting some errors before, so let me go ahead and change my default templates to millimeters. And this will avoid some problems as we get down the road here. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a new assembly. And I'm actually going to want this assembly to be in millimeters, so I'm going to just go ahead and change it and make it change it to millimeters right now. Now when I first begin the assembly, you guys probably have already seen this. To bring in a part in the assembly, you just go ahead and click on Browse and start bringing in your parts. But if you hadn't used this before, this is the area where we're going to be here to create the layout. So we select the layout. It automatically goes onto the front plane. That's the default that it starts with. But you can actually, this is a 3D sketch, so you can actually create any images on any of the planes or reference to any of them here, any other plane. So basically, I'm just going to start sketching in. I ended up out of my layout sketch there. I'm going to start sketching inside my layout mode. So the thing about a layout mode is you just start creating your sketch items, and you're going to keep the relationships between the sketch entities because those are really what's going to be the most important. The dimensions and the relationships between the sketch entities. So I'm going to go ahead and dimension this, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about when I tell you those are the most important. So this is going to be 42 and this will be 50. And this will be 17. Once I have all my sketch entities for my first component here, I just box select them, and I use the pop-up here, pop-up icon, to actually create a block out of it. So here's my block. I'm going to rename this block. This is going to be my bracket. And then I'm going to take my bracket and I'm going to associate it to the origin here to kind of anchor down my block. Now you see the block didn't change the size, nothing moved, it just moved all by itself. Now you'll see that I can actually rotate this 360 degrees around the origin where I created that relationship. So I'm going to need to create another relationship here to keep this from moving. Next thing I want to do is go ahead and create another block. Just go ahead and use a corner rectangle here. I'm going to put a construction line in here because I'm going to need to use this a little bit later to put some insertion points. And then I'll start dimensioning. 100. $15. $9. Put a couple of sketch points in here on my construction line. And go ahead and dimension those. That first one's going to be 10. Second one is going to be 25. Okay. Go ahead and do the same thing with this one. Box select it. Make a block out of it. This is actually going to be my hold down, so I'm going to rename that. And I'm going to go ahead and attach it right here to my bracket, and you'll see there's the motion for my hold down. Okay, now I don't have to create all of my blocks inside this part. I can actually create a new part outside of the sketch, start on any plane I want, and start creating the sketch entities for this new block that I'm going to create here. Now that this is complete, I'm just going to use this to make this block. Click OK. Go ahead and rename it, right? This is going to be my handle. But the cool thing about this is now that it's inside my sketch here, I can just go ahead and I can go Control C to copy this. Then I can go back to my assembly, or the layout of my assembly, and just Control V, and there's my block. So I take my block and I associate it right there, and now I have it right here. All right. Now I could have saved that block. I could go back in to that assembly there if I wanted to, and I can right click and save the block, and that's going to save it onto my drive, and then I can use it later for anything else. Okay, so I don't need this anymore. I can get out of the sketch, close the part. I don't need to save it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to insert a block. So I've got this block tool right here in my layout command manager. I'm going to insert a block that I had saved earlier. It's called link. There it is. I don't need more than one, so I'm just going to drop that one in there. And then we'll go ahead and associate this as well. Drag the block, create the association with the other blocks. Let me get this out of the way here so I can, there we go. I want to make sure I don't want to create the wrong association, so I go ahead and associate it there and there. Now, as I move my handle, you can see that there's my motion. So once I get this horizontal here, I kind of want to make a measurement here. The problem is I got a angle there, so I'm going to put in a temporary restraint in here just so that I can get this distance right for the next component that I put in here. So now this distance, 59 millimeters. Good. So all I have to do is delete that. Go ahead and start a new part for my layout here. And this is going to be the pin that I'm going to use to hold down for my clamp. That's going to be vertical also. And that's going to be 59 millimeters because that's what I measured on that distance before. Box select, create my block. This is going to be pin. Let's see, probably need to, there we go. Grab these two items and make them coincident or collinear. So the pin doesn't move when I move the handle. And now I have my hold down, and I can adjust this back and forth, go in and edit the block and change the dimensions. This seems to be working really well. I'm ready to go ahead and create my parts. So what I do is I start with one of the parts and I just make it into a component. Start with one of my layouts here, my blocks. I right click on it in the assembly layout area and I make part from block. In this case I'm going to start on the block. Alright, so there's my bracket. I'm not even editing the part, so the first thing I need to do is go ahead and edit the part. I'm still in context of my assembly here. So what I want to do is on the front plane here, I'm just going to go ahead and create another sketch so that I keep the block sketch that was part of my original, see right here, the bracket sketch, so that I can keep that and create relationships to it. So I'm going to go ahead and draw what's going to end up being my the outside of my bracket here. I'm just going to throw some things in here to kind of get this go ahead and add some relationships in here. Some of these relationships are going to drive this and help me get it fully defined here. 5 millimeters. This one will also be 5 millimeters. This distance here, 15 millimeters. That's going to be vertical. Oops. Not that one. That one. There we go. Now I have a fully defined sketch here. I can go ahead and extrude this. I'm going to go mid-plane, about 25 millimeters. There's my solid. Let me go ahead and finish this up here. There we go. 5 millimeters on the bottom ought to do. There we go. Go ahead and shell this. Make that 5 also. Start on this face. Select tangency there. So all I have to do is grab these last two faces for the shell. It gave me an error, but it still worked. And it's probably because it did away with these radiuses right here because I had it too thick. So if I want to get that back, I probably need either bigger radiuses on the bottom or either a thinner thickness on my shell here. So let's change that to 3 millimeters. Rebuild that. Much better. So there's one of the parts there. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. There's the assembly. You'll notice with the tilde there, the little tilde mark, it shows that the assembly is actually in context and as well as virtual inside my assembly. So this part does not exist outside the assembly. The part doesn't even exist on the drive yet because I haven't even saved the assembly. So what I would do is I would go ahead and save the assembly, give it a name. It would change this assembly 1 to whatever the name of the assembly was, and then I could actually right-click on the part if I wanted to and save it to an external file. So save in external file. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and close this up, and I'm going to show you what this assembly looks like once it's all completed. Here's that completed assembly of that hold down clamp. Using just the basic techniques that I was just showing you. And the motion is still alive and well, just as it was in the layout. Okay? Let's go ahead and move on now to the sketch picture method that I was talking about. In this situation, we're going to actually start with a part inch. This is going to be my initial part, the root part for my assembly that I'm going to use to create all the in-context parts from this point on. So what I do is I start a sketch on the front plane, and I want to create something that's going to help me to scale my picture to the appropriate size here. So I'm going to start with a circle because I'm going to use that picture for that old-time bicycle, and I want to set the diameter of the wheel to a specific dimension by scaling the picture. So I'm going to put a couple of sketch entities in here. And I want the inside diameter of my rim to be about 40 inches. Okay? So now that I've got that set, that's going to be my scale sketch. So I'm just going to rename that. I spelled it wrong. Scale sketch. All right? So then I use my tools, sketch tools, and then way down at the bottom there's sketch picture. So inside my folder here I have this picture of the bicycle, and I bring it in, and I don't care what size it is, I just go ahead and bring it in here. And then I use this thing here called the scale tool to size the picture to the appropriate distance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it kind of across the middle of the rim, starting at one edge and then going horizontal to the other edge of the inside of the rim, and then I'm going to set it to that dimension. Then I'm going to take the whole model, the whole picture, and I'm going to see if I can move it and get it lined up with my sketch. Now it looks like my sketch line is a little bit too low, so I'm going to grab this and I'm just going to move this. Oops. Try to put it right there on that corner. Okay, so I tried to put the sketch there, but you see my oval is a little bit wrong, so that means that my sketch, my scale wasn't set right. So when I go back into it, I can actually change this turn this off and then turn it back on. There we go. Set that up more at the center. So that when I set this, to the edge of the bicycle wheel, I can scale it just a tiny bit more and then just bring it down, get it lined up. So that looks really good. I'm going to line it up just a little bit lower there. That looks really good. So now that's my scale sketch and the picture that I have here. So I go ahead and I save this, save as, and I'm going to save it as my layout base for my sketch here, for my assembly. And that's what I'm going to start creating my in-context relationships from in the assembly. I always leave this alone. I don't create any parts inside this particular sketch because this is just a setup for the image that I'm using for my assembly. So now I take this and I'm going to actually make the assembly from this sketch. So this is going to be my very first component in the assembly. And I'm going to have to put it in the assembly here. I'm just going to click OK to have it set right at the origin because I want my origin and the sketch origin and the assembly origin all to be lined up. So there's my sketch picture now inside my assembly. Layout base. The only thing that's in it is just this sketch. So the next thing I want to do is I want to start adding in-context components. So before, when I had the blocks, I would right-click on the block and make a part from the block. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to insert a new part into the assembly. I have to select a plane that I'm going to create the new part from. So I'm going to start on the front plane. And there's my part, Part 4, Assembly 2. And I've started a sketch on the front plane. So my sketch is open and I'm now editing the Part 4 in the assembly. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and start with a spline here because I'm going to do this frame. And start throwing a spline in here. And I'm going to end my spline right down here. You see this little bump out? That's actually a little foot step where the bottom fork intersects with the bike. So this time I'm going to go ahead and grab this handle here, make that vertical. Horizontal. And then I'm just going to grab this one. There we go. Get it pretty close in there. That actually looks really good. Go ahead and exit my sketch. Now I can go ahead and hide that component because all I'm working with is my in-context component here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a plane. So there's my spline. It's already selected. All I have to do is go to the endpoint here and select another one to get a perpendicular plane for that spline. Go ahead and start a new sketch on that spline. Pretty easy, just going to be a circle. Since I'm making this just as a model, I'm not going to create a tubular frame. I'm going to make everything solid. So I'm going to make this 25 millimeters so that it comes out. Oops. 25 millimeters so that it comes out as an inch when I changed my or close to an inch. There we go. Now I'm going to edit this sketch again because I came out of it when I changed the, and I want to create an intersection point, or a pierce point actually, between my circle and my spline. There we go. Now I'm ready to do a sweep. Go ahead and select my circle as my profile, my spline as my path. And now I'm on my way to creating the individual components for the bicycle. There's a good start to my frame. Go ahead and edit, rename my part there to frame. And you'll see also that it's still got the tilde. That tilde means that it's in context. It doesn't exist on the hard drive at all. When I bring back my my layout sketch here, my layout base sketch for the picture, you can see how my frame now follows how closely the frame follows the picture. And as I do that with all my other components, like this might be a revolve, or this might be just an extrude, but it won't match it quite right because it looks like it's turned a little bit off flat to the screen. But that's basically how you get started with the sketch picture and top to bottom assembly modeling in an assembly using a sketch picture there. We're not really using the layout mode, but we are creating those in context parts inside of our assembly. So what I want to do here is I want to open this and show you what this assembly would look like if we went ahead and completed all of these components. This is the finished assembly. I've actually even included a mate reference that will allow me to actually show motion in the wheels. If I can get it to work here. There we go. See how the front wheel and the back wheel are moving in the same rotation? The pedals are moving around and staying flat like if there were feet on them. Now I still have that old bicycle layout here. I'm going to unhide it so that you can see what the picture looks like. And then show my sketches. So you can see how well I did matching the picture to the assembly. So you can't hardly see the picture because it's covered up by. So if I actually edited this, I could move the picture and you'd see where it was. I'll move it away from my assembly. See, there it is. Undo, snap it right back. Undo again. Probably moved more than I thought. So with it turned sideways, you can kind of see that there's a little bit of mess, but there we go. That's much better. So we got pretty close with that. So there we've taken a look at assembly layout using the layout mode in the assembly, and top-down modeling using sketch picture in the assembly as well. So I'd like you, thank you for attending today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Come back, we'll have more interesting stuff to come.